Good morning, or whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. I wanted to capture a few thoughts to share for this week. It's going to be a barn burner of a week, I suspect, on many different levels for most of us. And I was actually going to record this yesterday, but I wanted to give myself some space to breathe with what's been happening, the latest shootings and the outpouring of grief and anger that is highly appropriate. And I hope we direct it in a constructive way to facilitate change. My notes to myself about what I want to convey are as follows. 3 bullet points. One is, of course you're angry. The second is darkness, darkness. Of course I hear the old song. Darkness, darkness, be my pillow. And then last but not least, and perhaps central to what I'm trying to convey, circling back to the idea of radical acceptance. Not that these things are okay, they're not. But they are what we're dealing with. And challenging those in power to face the truth is a continuation of that work. Radical acceptance, forcing those in power to actually deal with what is. That very quickly gets into the realm of climate change as well, but I digress. We don't do ourselves any favors individually or societally when we deny what's actually happening in any regard. And the more pressing the matter is, the worse the consequences are, because then we, through our inaction and denial, we make the matter worse. And certainly whatever the underlying issue is, isn't being dealt with and maybe spinning out of control. See, climate change, or gun violence, the shootings and so on. By addressing what's real and coming to an understanding, a common understanding with most, meaning more than half of our populace, more than half of the country, way more than half, agrees on things like a reasonable set of conditions like a background check for someone who's purchasing a weapon, making sure that they're not a convicted felon or have a restraining order against them for violence against a partner or threatened violence against a partner, those kinds of things. We have an opportunity right now to take the grief that we're all feeling and make it into something useful. Pain sometimes can be fuel of a sort. It can propel us. It can be what is, sometimes the motivating force, or it can kick in the afterburners. We can use that energy if we use it, if we think about it the right way. So what I mean by, of course you're angry, is it is absolutely not only acceptable but very reasonable to be unreasonably angry at what's happening. It's a very human and a natural response. Of course you're angry and or anxious and or whatever else you're feeling. It's okay. We are dealing with a very challenging scenario that is beyond the realm of what we would have even thought possible a few years ago. The daily reality is so harsh and is increasingly so violent and so chaotic. Of course we're all feeling out of sorts and a little, out of phase with reality. The cognitive dissonance that we're dealing with on an individual and a societal level is profound. So if you're feeling not only angry and or sad and whatever else you're aware of, be mindful of the fact that I think all of us to some extent are, for lack of a better word, impaired a bit. I certainly find myself in that category. The cognitive dissonance, trying to hold on to one definition of reality that I know to be true versus what is certainly put out as the official party line from the powers that be, is dramatically different. And the dissonance between those things and or, the statements from assorted hardcore media creates a tension in the mind. And even though I stick with what I know to be true, it's still a bit of a stressor. It's like your mind is being pulled in a couple of different directions at once. And that's part of what's going on right now. There is an effort by people who do not have our nation's best interests at heart and who are potentially or possibly or probably working at the behest we know of, the Russian trolls, and there are agents that are also apparently employed by Iraq, I think. There's a bunch of people that are countries where they can buy their way into Trump's favor. They're doing that via creating the chaos that he needs for smoke and cover, so that we talk about what we're talking about, and he encourages the stochastic terror that we see more and more of. Now it's up to more than once a day, more than once in a 24-hour period. We have a stochastic terror event. This is not normal. This is not okay. And it is completely reasonable to be unreasonably upset in whatever form. And I see sometimes on Twitter and elsewhere people who want to, it's like there's one of two possibilities. Either we can all sing Kumbaya and pretend everything is fine and we're all going to get along just fine, when that's clearly not the case. I send love to all living things. And there are some people I don't want to be in the same building with because I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. They've demonstrated clearly that they are not to be trusted on a personal or political level. I have people in my personal life that I'm in that category with, and there's certainly people in politics that I wouldn't even waste my time trying to sit down and talk with them. They are not in a place where a reasonable conversation can be had. That's not to say, I might think it, that's not to make the argument that they are bad people, but that they're under the influence of something that is impairing their ability to think rationally, perhaps is the best way I can put that. I think of the Cult 45 movement as exactly that. It's a cult. It's a movement. It's not motivated by policy. Trump's not an ideologue. He's a racist. He's a fascist, and there's no real playbook for how we deal with that. We dealt with the fascists and the Nazis in the 40s, and while some of that stuff smoldered, it was fringe and disgusting until suddenly it wasn't anymore, and I don't understand. I mean, I do. I can look through the history and read books and see documentaries, which I have, which track the growth. And certainly, once Trump took office, it was like, okay, we're off to the races now. It's now okay to be an out-and-out fascist, apparently. And I'm never going to be okay with that. Never going to be okay with that. But that's the chaotic part that everybody, in power would like us to focus on. It's the chaos. We're all in chaos to some degree or another because the situation is chaotic and we're responding to it. So there's at least some element of chaos in what we're dealing with. And for most people, that means a very chaotic energy. For me, I allow the chaotic feelings to come, and like in all other intense feelings, with some exceptions, I allow it to be like a wave and to come into my awareness and present itself for me to process, to build in intensity to its maximum level, which sometimes feels like it's over my head, but we let it go to wherever it needs to go. Breathe with it. Don't fight it. Just be with it. And then if I don't fight with it, if I don't hold on to it, if I don't attach to it in some way, it will recede like a wave at the ocean. And those feelings of intensity, we can use that anger or that sadness or that grief or outrage or what have you. We can hold on to what it is about that situation that elicits that feeling and use it as a motivation without having to feel that feeling all the time. That's a key point. If you can essentially put a bookmark in those feelings and say, this is where I feel with this, this is my conclusion, this is how I feel after thinking it all through and thinking about all the variables that I know about right now, this is how I feel about this particular issue and here's why. Set that aside and keep that for reference, but allow yourself to be in a place of more dispassioned discourse, less impassioned emotion when you're having the conversation will serve you well. Not that it's better for anyone else. You will get better results that way if you're able to maintain a level of calm as you talk about whatever it is you're advocating for or the change that you're trying to make or what have you. Whether it's asking for a raise or advocating for services for the homeless. Making your point in a way that is as well-mannered as possible, as well-reasoned as possible, and, an awareness that the people with whom you're dealing have their own agenda, their own needs. They have lives, they have their own biases. They're people just like us. And while they may be in favor of policies that are dramatically different than what you or I might advocate for, on some level, they're just people like us. So, it helps to remember that. Even if they're under the influence of Cult 45, there's still a human being in there. They may be a little tough to scratch the surface and find the heart of. It's masked right now by their hatred and their anger. There will come a time in this nation's progression when those who are Trumpists now or who have been until very recently are going to realize how badly they have been used by Trump to harm the nation. They've been used in that way. And my guess is that they won't take it well. When they realize that they have been used by him, they've been used by him when he claimed to want to be their staunchest, supporter and go to Washington and work for them. Yeah, all right. But that was his shtick. He's going to go drain the swamp. No, he's going to fill the swamp with more creatures. Thank you. We're dealing with a very anomalous situation, and so it's totally fitting that our feelings and our responses to this situation are also somewhat anomalous. We are not in a normal scenario at all. And the new normal is not pretty. Excuse me. Beg your pardon. So, getting back to, the fact that what we do have control over is whether we hold on to any of this. That is something that's important to remember. Feelings are going to come and go in life, and some of them are going to be overwhelmingly intense. And if you have the ability to be with that and have it not terrify you and not tear you apart and just move through it, however you need to, that answer is uniquely defined. Everybody's got their own coping mechanisms for dealing with intense feelings that are uncomfortable, whether it's grief or anger or what have you. Find ways that don't hurt you and that don't hurt other people, but find ways. Have some ideas in mind now so that as things continue to get more intense, you've already defined for yourself some ways in which you can essentially do self-care. Do what you know works for you when you're feeling, for example, sad. What are 3 to 5 things that you know help you feel better when you're feeling really sad? Maybe one of them is, snuggle up with your companion animal, or, snuggle up with the one you love, or have a nice cup of herbal tea that you keep in the back of the cupboard for just such an occasion. Or maybe you smoke a blunt. I don't know. Whatever works for you. Figure out some ways to be kind to yourself, ways that help you feel better, help you take control of your own state of well-being and feeling better within yourself, because we are in a time where there are many external forces that will push you toward not being okay. And so finding ways to bring yourself back into a place where you feel okay, and taking that autonomy back and being able to self-determine for yourself to some degree, being able to direct your own energy and take it in the direction that you want it to go. It's very empowering, and it's a way of, it's subversive in its own way. I keep coming back to that. But you have the right to determine for yourself whether you want to be swamped by these feelings. I certainly get waves of intense energy, and straight up, I break down and cry several times a day. The shootings did not help. Fascism and racism and what's going on at the border, and we're living in a state of absolute horror, trying to carry on as if life is, quote, normal. It's not normal. It's not normal. But it is what it is at the same time. So there's this interesting balancing act of trying to accept reality for what it is and letting the feelings that result from recognizing that is reality, letting those feelings come, crest like a wave, and then recede as they organically come up. That is the way I get through the day. So when grief comes up or anger comes up, usually it's grief, sadness, deep grief and sadness. When those things come up, I let myself be with them. If the tears come, I try to keep myself as quiet as possible because I don't want to disturb other people when it hits. And I usually try and go outside if I can and just silently cry. Occasionally, a few sobs will come, but I'm not going to feel ashamed about that. And you shouldn't either if they come to you. And if they don't come to you, don't feel good or bad, or just let whatever your process is be your process. There's no right or wrong way to deal with this stuff. It's horrifying. And for a lot of people, it's still, they're still in a state of denial. And that's understandable. That's a very human reaction. Dealing with horror is challenging. And we're all compromised by that process and doing the best we can. So bear that in mind and know that I love you. Have a good day.